Mara didn't notice the exact day it happened. There wasn't a single moment where the world sat her down and said, "Congratulations, you've officially become background noise." It was quieter than that. It was the slow fade of being interrupted and not finishing her sentence. The way people started looking past her, not at her. The way "you're so strong" replaced "how are you?" The way her phone stopped lighting up, unless she was the one who reached first. If you asked Mara, she would have told you she was fine. She'd smile on cue, she'd make jokes, she'd say the right things with the right timing. She'd show up early, leave late, hold it together, keep it moving, keep everyone else afloat. And that was the problem. Mara had become so reliable that people forgot she was human. She lived in a modest 2-bedroom townhouse on the edge of Columbus, Ohio, in a neighborhood that looked like someone had selected pleasant from a drop-down menu. Trim lawns, identical mailboxes, a swing set in at least every third yard. Her kitchen window faced a small patch of grass where a maple tree leaned like it had secrets. She used to imagine that tree was like her, still standing, even in bad weather, even when no one bothered to look up. She was 41. Not old, not young, somewhere in the middle where the world began speaking to you as if your most interesting years had already been spent, like you were a candle that had burned down enough to be practical. She had a job at a medical billing office that never called her brilliant, but always called her dependable. She had a teenage son named Eli, who loved her in the distracted way teenagers loved, like she was the steady background music of his life. She had a mother who called when she needed something, and a sister who called when she wanted to complain. Mara had friends too, technically, but lately friendship had started feeling like a museum exhibit she used to visit more often. Everyone was busy, everyone was tired, everyone was always about to circle back. And Mara, who never wanted to be a burden, kept telling herself it was normal. Life got heavy, people got busy. That didn't mean she mattered less, it just meant life. But some nights when the dishes were done and the house finally quieted down, when Eli disappeared into his room and the laundry hummed like a distant thought, Mara would stand in front of the bathroom mirror and stare like she was waiting for the glass to confess something. The woman looking back wasn't ugly. She wasn't broken. She wasn't even sad in a way anyone could clearly point at. She was just tired. Her eyes held a kind of carefulness, like she'd learned not to hope too loudly. A fine line had formed near her mouth from years of smiling through things. A few silver hairs had started appearing at her temples, stubborn and bright like they were making a statement. Mara would touch her cheek sometimes, almost as if she was verifying she still existed. On a Thursday in late October, the air felt like paper, dry, crisp, full of potential to cut you if you weren't careful. Mara drove home from work with her heater blasting and her mind doing what it always did, replays, conversations she could have handled better, emails she needed to answer, Eli's missing homework, her mother's appointment next week. The world had a way of making sure Mara's attention was always paid forward, never inward. At a red light, she glanced at herself in the rearview mirror and had the sudden, irrational thought that if she disappeared tomorrow, the world would keep moving without even a stumble. People would be inconvenienced, sure. But would anyone actually feel the absence? Would anyone feel it the way you feel it when the power goes out, immediately, undeniably, with a kind of panic? The thought hit hard enough that she sucked in a breath and felt it lodge in her chest like a stone. That night, she made Eli spaghetti because he liked it and because it was easy and because her brain couldn't handle decisions. She listened to him talk about school, about a friend he was annoyed with, about a game he wanted. She nodded in the right places. She laughed in the right places. She said, "That's crazy, and I know, right?" She was present the way a lamp was present, useful, steady, unnoticed until it stopped working. After dinner, Eli took his plate to the sink without being asked, and Mara felt a small spark of relief, the kind parents sometimes mistake for joy. She stood at the sink and washed dishes with her hands in warm water, letting the heat soften her fingers, letting the routine convince her she was okay. Later, she sat on the couch with a blanket over her lap and opened her phone. She scrolled without meaning to. Weddings, babies, vacations, someone's kitchen remodel, someone's new boyfriend, someone's before and after transformation that looked suspiciously like a new face entirely. Mara kept scrolling the way you keep picking at a scab you promised yourself you'd leave alone. A post came up from a woman she used to know in high school, 2 years younger, still radiant, still posing, in a way that said the world was lucky to have her. The comments were full of hearts and fire emojis and Queen. And aging backwards, Mara stared at the screen and felt something inside her fold inward. She set the phone down like it had burned her. She wasn't jealous, not exactly. She was grieving. That's what it was. Grieving the version of herself who used to feel seen without trying, the version of herself who didn't have to earn attention by being helpful, the version of herself who believed love was something that arrived like sunlight, not something you had to bargain for in tiny pieces. Mara went to bed early and couldn't sleep. At 3:12 a.m., she got up and walked to the kitchen. She made coffee because she didn't know what else to do with the restlessness inside her. She sat at the small table near the window watching the dark yard. The maple tree swayed slightly as if it was breathing. Mara wrapped her hands around the mug and stared into the steam. She didn't cry. She wanted to. But Mara had gotten good at not crying. Crying felt like asking something of the world, and Mara had trained herself not to ask. The next morning, she went to work and did her job well. She answered calls politely. She corrected mistakes. She smiled when people walked by. She helped a coworker with a spreadsheet, even though she had her own work stacked up. She listened to someone complain about their husband and responded with empathy she didn't have the energy to produce. At lunchtime, she ate a salad at her desk and looked at the wall like she was waiting for it to speak. Around 2:45 p.m., her boss emailed asking if she could stay late to cover for someone who called off. It wasn't phrased like a request. It was phrased like a foregone conclusion. Mara stared at the screen, feeling the familiar pressure of being the one who always said yes. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She typed, "Sure, no problem," and hit send before she could talk herself out of it. Something in her sagged. At 6:30 p.m., the office was mostly empty. The lights hummed softly. Mara's computer screen glowed in the dimness, and she finished the last of the extra work. She rubbed her eyes and leaned back in her chair. Her phone buzzed, a text from Eli asking if he could eat at his friend's house. Mara replied, "Yes, have fun, love you." Then she stared at her sent message and realized she couldn't remember the last time someone had texted her just to ask if she was okay. On the way home, she stopped at a small coffee shop she'd never tried before. It was one of those places tucked into a strip of storefronts, half hidden behind a nail salon and a dry cleaner. The sign outside said Juniper and Clay in warm white letters. Mara almost drove past it, but something made her pull into the parking lot. Maybe she wanted a different routine. Maybe she wanted proof that she could choose something for herself. Maybe she just wanted a place where no one knew her, where she didn't have to perform being okay. Inside, the coffee shop smelled like cinnamon and espresso and fresh bread. Soft music played, something jazzy and calm. There were plants everywhere, trailing down shelves like lazy green hair. The lighting was warm, flattering. It made everyone look like they belonged in a movie where good things happen. Mara stepped up to the counter and glanced at the menu. She didn't know what she wanted. She always knew what everyone else wanted, but when it came to herself, her mind went blank. "Hi," a voice said. "Take your time." Mara looked up and met the eyes of the barista. He was probably in his 30s, with a calm face and a kind of attentiveness that didn't feel forced. His hair was dark and slightly messy, like he'd run his hands through it too many times. He wore a simple black apron with the shop's logo. There was nothing flashy about him, but there was something steady. "Thanks," Mara said, then laughed softly, embarrassed at her own uncertainty. "I'm not sure that's allowed," he said, like he meant it. "Do you want something sweet, something bold, something comforting?" Mara blinked. No one asked her questions like that. "Comforting," she heard herself say. He nodded, as if this confirmed something. "Okay, I'd recommend the maple oat latte. It's kind of like A hug that doesn't ask for anything in return. Mara didn't know why those words hit her the way they did, but she felt her throat tighten. She swallowed. "I'll take that," she said quickly. "Size? Medium." He typed it in, then looked up. "Name? Mara." He paused a fraction of a second, like he was letting the name settle. "Mara, got it." She paid and stepped aside, waiting near a small table by the window. She watched him work. He moved with calm confidence, like someone who had learned how to be present without rushing. He steamed milk, poured espresso, added syrup. He wasn't performing, he was just doing. When he called her name, maple oat latte for Mara, his voice sounded like he actually meant her, not just the order. She took the cup. Their fingers brushed briefly, a small accidental contact that felt startlingly human. "Hope it helps," he said. "Thanks," Mara replied. She sat by the window and took a sip. It did feel like a hug, warm, sweet, grounding. Mara held the cup in both hands and let herself breathe. She didn't notice the barista watching her for a moment, not in a creepy way, but in a way that suggested he was paying attention. When she finally glanced up, he was already looking away, wiping down the counter. Mara stayed longer than she planned. She watched people come and go. She listened to the music. She let her shoulders drop. She didn't realize how tense she'd been until she wasn't. When she finally stood to leave, she tossed her empty cup and headed toward the door. "Hey," the barista called softly. Mara turned. He stepped from behind the counter, holding a small paper bag. "We have these mini cinnamon rolls. End of the day, we're supposed to toss what doesn't sell." He held the bag out. "Take them home. No charge." Mara hesitated. "I can pay." "No," he said gently but firmly. "It's not about that." Something about the way he said it made Mara feel seen in a way she wasn't prepared for. "Okay," she whispered. "Thank you." He nodded. "See you around, Mara." Mara walked to her car with the bag in her hand and a strange sensation in her chest that felt like warmth and fear at the same time, like hope. And Mara didn't trust hope. Hope was the thing that came in loud and left in silence. Still, that night, when Eli came home later and she offered him the cinnamon roll, he smiled and said, "Whoa, where'd you get this?" Mara shrugged like it didn't matter. "New coffee shop." Eli ate it in 3 bites and said, "You should go there again." Mara didn't answer. She just watched her son chew and realized she hadn't heard anyone tell her she should do something for herself in a long time. Over the next week, Mara found herself thinking about Juniper and Clay more than she wanted to admit. Not just the coffee, not just the cinnamon rolls, the feeling, the way her shoulders dropped inside that warm light, the way one stranger's kindness had made her feel real again, like she wasn't just a function. On Monday, she went back. She told herself it was for the coffee. She told herself it was convenient. She told herself it was nothing. The barista looked up when she walked in, and his face shifted into something that looked like recognition. Real recognition, like she mattered enough to be remembered. "Mara," he said, smiling. "Back for another hug and a cup?" Mara laughed, surprised it came easily. "I guess I am." "Good," he said. "What kind of day are we having?" Mara paused. Her instinct was to say fine. Always fine. But something in his eyes made the word catch. "Long," she admitted. He nodded like he understood. "Then we're upgrading you to a large." "I didn't say it's a public service," he said with a small grin. "Name's Ben, by the way." "Mara," she said automatically, then realized. "Oh, you already know that." "I know your name," Ben said. "I don't know you. Not yet." "Not yet." The words followed Mara to her table. They followed her through the first sip. They followed her all the way home. Over the following weeks, Juniper and Clay became her quiet ritual. Not every day. She wasn't reckless. She wasn't someone who did dramatic life changes. But she went enough that Ben began to remember her order without asking. He began to ask questions that weren't small talk, not invasive, just human. "How's Eli doing?" he asked one day, and Mara blinked because she hadn't told him her son's name more than once. She hadn't realized Ben was listening. "Teenage," Mara said, smiling. "So, chaos with a side of sarcasm?" Ben laughed. "Yeah, that tracks." "How do you know?" Mara asked. Ben lifted a brow. "I have 2 younger sisters." I basically survived adolescence twice. Mara found herself asking him about his sisters, about the shop, about how long he'd worked there. Ben answered without rushing. He didn't dominate the conversation. He didn't make her feel like she had to earn his attention. He just stayed present. One afternoon, she came in after a brutal day at work. Her boss had criticized her in front of a coworker for a mistake that wasn't even hers. Her mother had left 3 voicemails about something that could have been a text. Eli had forgotten his lunch at home and blamed her for not reminding him. Mara walked into Juniper and Clay holding herself together with a last thread of politeness. Ben took one look at her and didn't ask what she wanted. He just nodded toward the table by the window. "Sit," he said softly. "I've got you." Mara froze. No one said things like that to her. She sat because her legs suddenly felt like they didn't belong to her. Ben made her latte and brought it over himself, setting it down with a napkin and a small cookie. He didn't ask questions right away. He didn't demand explanations. He didn't try to fix her. He just sat across from her for a moment, resting his elbows on the table like he had time. Mara stared at him like he was a foreign language. "You don't have to talk," Ben said, "but you do have to breathe." Mara's throat tightened, her eyes burned. She looked away quickly, embarrassed. Ben didn't move. "It's okay," he said, voice low, "whatever it is." That's when the tears came, silent, stubborn tears that slid down her cheeks without permission. Mara pressed a hand to her face, mortified. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Ben shook his head. "Don't apologize for being human." Mara let out a shaky laugh that sounded like it had been trapped in her chest for years. "I'm not even sure why I'm crying." Ben's eyes didn't flinch. Sometimes the body keeps receipts the mind hasn't looked at yet. Mara stared at him, stunned by how accurately it landed. She wiped her cheeks. "I feel stupid." "You don't look stupid," Ben said. "You look tired." Mara exhaled. That word, yes, tired, but not the kind of tired sleep fixed. The kind of tired that comes from carrying your whole life alone. Ben leaned back slightly, giving her space. "Want to tell me what the tired's about?" Mara's mouth opened, then closed. "Because where do you start when the tired is your identity?" She began, voice cracking. "I feel like I'm disappearing." Ben didn't react dramatically. He didn't gasp or pity her. He just nodded slowly, like he'd been waiting for her to say the truth. "Like no one sees me," Mara continued, words tumbling out now that the door had cracked. "Like I'm useful but not important. Like I'm the person people remember when they need something, and then they forget again. And I know that sounds pathetic." Ben raised a hand gently. "Stop. Don't do that." "Do what?" "Call your pain pathetic," Ben said. "It's not." Mara swallowed hard. "I don't even know when it started." Ben looked at her with a quiet steadiness. "Maybe it started the first time you learned you'd get love for being easy." Mara's breath caught. Ben's voice stayed calm. "Some people learn they get attention for being loud. Some people learn they get attention for being pretty. Some people," he paused, "some people learn they get attention for being helpful, for being the strong one, for never needing anything." Mara felt exposed in a way that was terrifying and relieving. "How do you—" she started. Ben shrugged slightly. "I've met a lot of people, and I'm pretty good at noticing what others miss." Mara stared at him, and for the first time in a long time, she felt something shift. Not happiness, not romance, something deeper. Recognition. Ben didn't tell her she was overreacting. He didn't tell her to be grateful. He didn't tell her to stay positive. He let her be exactly what she was in that moment, exhausted, unseen, and still standing. Mara went home that day with her eyes puffy and her heart oddly lighter, like she'd finally set down one bag she didn't realize she was carrying. Over the next month, she and Ben developed a kind of friendship that Mara didn't have energy to name. It was not dramatic. It was not instant intimacy. It was a slow unfolding, a steady pattern of small kindnesses, conversations that felt like exhaling. Ben would slide her a cookie when her shoulders looked tense. He'd ask about Eli's latest chaos. He'd tell her about his sisters and how one of them was applying to nursing school. Mara would tell him about her job and how she was good at it but never celebrated for it. Ben would listen like the details mattered. One day, as Mara stood near the counter, Ben said casually, "You know what I notice about you?" Mara's stomach tightened. "What?" You always ask people how they are, Ben said, even when you're clearly not okay yourself. Mara blinked. That's just being polite. Ben shook his head. No, that's you making sure everyone else feels held. Mara felt her face warm. It's not that deep. Ben smiled faintly. Mara, everything about you is that deep. You just don't let yourself admit it. Mara went quiet. Ben leaned closer, voice soft. You didn't fade, he said. You deepened. And I'm sorry the world acts like that makes you less. Mara's eyes burned again. She looked away quickly. Ben didn't push. He didn't chase the emotion. He just went back to making coffee, like he wasn't shaking her whole life with the sentence. That night, Mara sat in front of her bathroom mirror again. Same lighting, same face. But something was different. She looked at her eyes and didn't feel like she was staring at a stranger. She saw a woman who had survived, a woman who had kept going, a woman who had love.